This episode of the Leap Forward podcast is brought to you by Bridge LT, leaders in conversational learning and innovation. Through AI role plays, technical simulators, and comprehensive training programs, Bridge LT is revolutionizing the future of corporate and enterprise education.
Today on Leap Forward, we're joined by Paul Lilly, Sales and Operations Director at MG Motor. Paul shares his journey from luxury automotive brands to iconic motorcycle manufacturers, highlighting the transformative power of brand connection and technology in automotive. He discusses the rise of EVs, the balance between performance and sustainability, and the future of workshops in a software-driven world. Paul's advice: stay adaptable, curious, and open to the unexpected. Welcome to Leap Forward. I'm absolutely delighted, Paul, to have you on the show. Thank you for giving up some time.
It's a pleasure.
So just to kind of kick things off, why don't you give us a little bit of a sort of introduction to kind of who you are, your current kind of role, and let's take it from there.
Thank you, Justin. So Paul Lilly, currently working for MG Motor, sales director, looking after in the main Central and Eastern Europe, which is an exciting developing area. Also looking after part of the development of the premium product for MG in the UK. New to the company, so only been with the company a short time, but been in automotive, two-wheel, four-wheel for the last 25 years. Sometimes it feels longer and sometimes it feels like it's flown by, but yeah. So
why don't you colour that in for us? Tell us a little bit about the journey to date.
Yeah, look, it goes all the way back to, I guess, 2001, finishing uni, doing a business degree back in Edinburgh. And then from that, wanted to go into business. Part of my degree was working for Motorola, just to get some kind of corporate or industry experience. Finished that. They asked me to stay on for a while, and was fortunate enough to have a bit of a mentor up there, a man who I remember fondly, still around somewhere up in Scotland, I think, an American guy called Bob, asked me to stay on and become an account coordinator for them, based in near Edinburgh and looking after Ireland and Germany, where we had manufacturing facilities and they needed product supply. So I looked after that. But I've always had a hankering after cars, in particular, and was fortunate enough to see a job advertised for Jaguar Land Rover. We were living up in Edinburgh. The job was down in the Midlands, West Midlands, where they're based, and thought nothing ventured, nothing gained. So applied for a job as a parts pricing coordinator, and was fortunate enough through a interview process that went very, very badly to get offered a job, and myself and my partner at the time, we moved down to West Midlands. Wow. Big adventure, pretty much straight out of uni, to a place we'd never really known around the West Midlands, Stratford-upon-Avon area, which we've kept as a home base for the last 25 years, as I say. So parts pricing for UK, Middle East and Africa. So a little bit of travel. So straight into a bit of travel, which was nice. But very quickly moved on to a job with the engineering department, looking after what's now special vehicles, but at the time was accessory development for Jaguars and Land Rovers. A great little team up in Gaydon. And it was a great experience spending a couple of years just watching how the product development cycle works, right? Getting involved in all those things and seeing the inside of the car industry, something that I'd always wanted to know about, and it was a great opportunity to take. After a few years there, 2004, I wanted to get out on the road, see where the products ended up through the dealer network, and moved to Citroën in the UK as an after sales area manager. A couple of years there, then moved over to the what we would call the dark side when you were an after sales manager. So moved into sales, and with that went back up to Scotland. So spent a couple of years up in Scotland, and then looking after Citroën up in that region. And then wanted to get a bit more experience. Where can I go next? Okay, let's try something different. So fortunate to see a job advertised for Bentley Motors. So into end of 2008, left Citroën, and the world was a great place. 2008, start of 2009. So why not join a company that is dedicated to selling to high net worth individuals and bankers and things like that? So it wasn't necessarily ideal timing, but great grounding for my career. Joined them as a regional manager, and 4 years pretty much with Bentley. Had a great time, great experience, learning all sorts of things about lifestyle, luxury, the value of the brand, also the emotional attachment to cars, when you're working with Bentley and you've got competitors like Ferrari, Lamborghini, Aston Martin, McLaren were coming along at the time. A great experience to get into that, and not to mention Rolls-Royce, of course. And then wanted to get some international experience, and saw another job back at Jaguar Land Rover. It's almost like my spiritual home at times. And so when we're going into 2012, I think, and went back to Jaguar Land Rover to develop a used car program for their overseas region. So South America, India, Middle East, those sorts of areas. Bit of travel, spent 15 months doing that. And then I was asked to go and live in South Africa. Went to live in Johannesburg, took my family with me to become an operations manager for Sub-Sahara Africa. So based out of Johannesburg, but covering markets like Kenya, Tanzania, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Nigeria, Angola. It was just Ghana. It was an incredible experience. Of course, it was topped off by having Mauritius as part of the territory as well. So that was a nice little cherry on the top of that experience. Amazing time, amazing family experience, amazing industry experience, working with not just retailers but distributors as well. So slightly different angle on the overall business. And then family growing up, looking at what's the next step, and had a couple of choices to make, one of which was settling back down with the family, letting the kids grow up. We'd gone from a 2-kid family to a 3-kid and a dog family, and thought, okay, what's the thing to do? Unfortunately, Triumph Motorcycles came along, offered me the opportunity to take on their UK and Ireland business. Wow. Back in the UK, but it meant we could move back to Stratford-upon-Avon, and it just felt like going home, letting the kids settle into schooling. It was an easy fit to get back in there. Great respect for that business. John Bloor, who owns the business, and Nick Bloor, his son, who's the CEO. It's a big family business, and a lot of respect for that. And a great industry change from 4 wheels to 2 wheels, getting into bikes. Something I'd never contemplated before. I think I said to you earlier, always promised my gran I would never get on a bike. So what's the first thing I did? Was get a bike license. And then, so spent just over 3 years looking after their UK and Ireland business. They just launched the Bonneville range. So it was a booming business, great opportunity and great growth opportunity as a brand. Fast times, but the bike industry was growing massively at the time, particularly for a brand that had cool product and was developing well. And then Harley came along. Harley, it's no matter which way you look at it, it's the biggest motorcycle brand in the world. Instantly recognizable, lots of stereotypes, lots of everybody has an opinion about that brand, and they asked me to come in and be run the UK and Ireland, and then after that for 3 years, and then after that a couple of years as their sales and operations director for the EMEA region. That road ended in July of 2024, and joined MG shortly after as their sales director. So
wow,
yeah, it's been a flying 25 years.
It's incredible. I mean, so many different kind of perspectives that you've had. You said like kind of dark side, light side, whatever you want to kind of call it. But you kind of you had the kind of the 2 and 4, and you had kind of being kind of in South Africa and South America and used, and I mean you've got the full gamut, right? I mean, it's that perspective. It must be how has that helped inform and the way you think and the way you kind of act in the role that you're in now and as a person?
I think perspective is everything, and I've had lots of opportunities. I've been very, very lucky to be, in the right place at the right time, willing to take the opportunities that are presented as well, to broaden my horizon. I've always been curious. I've always wanted to know, how else does it work? If I look back at myself 25 years ago and how my opinion has changed, my thoughts have been developed, my expectations have been managed. I think one of the biggest things is I've always wanted to be able to see it from the other side, which is why moving from the factory into the facing the retailers was important. So that product development into the retail network was important. Also seeing how, the UK market is so well established. It's such a mature market. But that doesn't play out in all the markets around the world. And so to see that international kind of experience and build that picture of the world has been invaluable, and also from different angles. So either trying to grow the market, grow programs within the industry, developing markets and brands within those markets as well. So it's been great. And I mentioned stereotypes with Harley Davidson, but those stereotypes exist whether you're going from sales to after sales, as we joked about. Whether you be talking about developing networks, the difference between a retailer and a distributor. There's so many different angles. And then, of course, 4 wheels to 2 wheels. In 2 wheels, we talk about being 8, 10, 15 years behind 4 wheels. So again, carrying that experience, it's all added into your bank account of what can't be taken away from you. And that's invaluable experience, really.
Yeah, I can imagine you must be able to kind of almost apply, as you said, and I've said, the perspective to situations just from all of that kind of experience that you've had across the board. And I suppose now as well, we're at a very interesting stage, aren't we, in terms of the industry and there are challenges and opportunities all around us, and the pace of change. Kind of for you, like when you're able to kind of pull back for a moment, kind of like, what challenges and opportunities do you sort of see the industry facing right now?
I think the biggest challenge is knowing what direction the world is moving, without doubt, whether that be new energy products, whether that be driver aid, safety, the stigma about riding bikes and the noise that people perceive them to make. Compare that to the efficiency and the effectiveness of riding a bike. You then balance that up with the safety aspect. Again, coming back to stereotypes, bikes are dangerous. Well, it all depends on how you ride, where you ride, what you ride, and what other people are doing around you. In cars, you've got so many driver aids, you actually feel at times disconnected from the car. And I think one of the challenges is to avoid the car becoming just a white good, because there's many months, hours, people, years of development that goes into a car, and it's not just a white good. Some people treat them like that, but ultimately people buy from people, and therefore it's down to the experience, who you trust, what you enjoy. And so I think one of the biggest challenges is to keep the audience engaged, keep the consumers engaged, build that brand value, the heritage, and sell the benefits of the investment that goes into it. Not just the technology, but also the man hours, the amount of time that goes into developing, and the reasons behind it, from the design to the technology to the repair work that goes on to keep it on the road and make it an efficient and durable product. So I think that's one of our biggest challenges, is to just explain the product as best we can.
That's really interesting. I hadn't really thought about the sort of the human connect. When people talk about connectivity these days, they often talk about technology and connectivity, but you've kind of that human connection, and I guess from your experience of working with brands like Bentley as well, I suppose, in a sense, that human kind of craftsmanship that goes into it, and how you bring that and surface that up. How do you and you look across all of your experience, how do you practically do that? Give me some examples of how you've done that, or who's doing that well now.
I think motorcycle brands generally are best at it, because the consumer has to make a choice that they want to get a bike license first and foremost, no matter where you are in the world. There has to be that connection to the brand. So I think that getting bums on seats is important. In the car world, we talk about getting bums in seats, get them to drive the car. And that's really the driving force behind the final purchase decision. So once you get them through the showroom doors and into the car, you've got a really good chance of doing that. With a bike, it's different. It's a pure leisure product, and some people use them for commuting all around the world. They're used for different things, and no matter where you are in the world, you'll see, depending on the weather, a lot of the time, you'll see more or less bikes than you would in the UK, for example. But ultimately, cars have become such an easy product to own now. So affordable that it's the safe choice. It's the choice that's not just safe from a safety point of view, but safe from the point of view of it's an easy choice to make. You can get a license and you can drive. So I think bike brands generally, Triumph have been on an incredible journey to make their brand cool, which they've gone on a great journey with that. And I think have achieved great things with it, to be able to compete side by side with Harley Davidson, for example, which carries such a brand equity. I think my learning from places like Bentley, and you could probably apply it to Jaguar Land Rover as well, is consumers have choice. And, why would you buy a Bentley when you could buy an Aston Martin? Why would you buy an Aston Martin when you can buy a Maserati? And each brand has its value. You look at Porsche and what they've achieved with their engineering excellence. You compare that to Bentley. When I joined there in 2009, kind of Aston Martin DB9 was just coming out, I think, at the time. It's got that emotional connection. You get in the car, it's a James Bond car. You get in the car, you push the start button, and you get that burble of engine. And that's something that Bentley never really carried. And so Bentley really had to have a look at itself and decide, okay, we've got the German investment and engineering excellence that comes from being part of Volkswagen Group. And but what they maybe missed was a little bit of emotional connection. And that's where people came in, because people buy from people. And we were able to work on the basis of building the emotion behind it, building the connection to the factory, which was great factory experience at Bentley. If you ever get the opportunity to go up to CW1 and walk around the factory and go into the wood room and smell the wood and watch the leather being sewn, all those things are great experiences, and they really build the connection to the brand. Alongside that, Bentley then brought out products like the Super Sport, Continental GT. So all of a sudden they're going up performance. They're bringing in the noise, they're bringing in the emotion, the carbon fiber and the suede and the or Alcantara as it would be. So I think those brands, those lifestyle brands, really have they do it best. They really do it best. So, yeah.
And the other side of connection is connectivity, and sort of that leads me to sort of talk a little bit about technology, I suppose, in a sense. We're in a kind of we have been for many decades now in the automotive sector, this kind of constant sort of kind of period of innovation and change, technology driving that. Obviously now kind of AI, very much play. How is that sort of transforming, kind of your perspective and your business, and perhaps bring it to life for me a little bit?
Yeah, if I talk generally about automotive, I mean, Tesla, for better or worse, have transformed the automotive world, because it's become an experience to own or drive a Tesla. I owned a Model Y for a period of time, and it stopped being a car and actually became a bit of an experience. The user interface was incredible. And you didn't drive it because it was going from A to B. Part of what was enjoyable about driving it was the interaction, the way you could change the screen, you could entertain the kids, you could suddenly put it into ludicrous mode or whatever, high power mode, sport mode, and all of a sudden you're able to go 0 to 60 as fast as a Ferrari. So those things are they're game changers from a technology point of view or a user interface perspective, and that's rolled into a lot of other brands. You know, in my car today, of course, I drive MGs, and my expectation was at a certain level, but actually, MG have brought in usable technology, as most brands have, whether it be Apple CarPlay, whether it be Google Mapping, whether it be having the ability to set your charging schedule. If you've got, I drive a plug-in hybrid, but I also have a full electric. Being able to set the charging to suit me from my phone rather than having to be sat in the car. All of those things play a big part, alongside the safety features such as lane assist, such as blind spot monitoring, 360-degree cameras. All of those things have been brought in, and they're both practical but also engaging, which is good. At times, it also brings foibles.
Yeah.
You know, we spend more time talking about software than we do talking about the actual practical maintenance of a car. And I think that's something that the industry is having to evolve into, especially around full electric, that that DIY mechanic at home is much less possible. So again, you've got that risk of technology disconnecting the owner from the car. So again, bringing in apps to be able to preheat your car and set your charging schedule, or to look at your driving range and things like that, it's adding the connectivity back in from a technology point of view that's been removed from a mechanical perspective. I think it's important that we maintain that connection. And even in the bike world, there's apps and there's connectivity that's come along in bikes that you never previously had. You know, from a security point of view, you can track where your bike is. Easy product to steal, technically. So lift it in a van and away you go. Now you can see where your bike is, where previously you'd lock it up and hope that it'd be there when you got back. So technology is helping quite a lot in a lot of practical and also engagement areas.
It's interesting, again, coming back to that connectivity point. It makes me think about sort of, you know, your kind of, you know, view on, you know, the kind of that sort of emotional side of driving and or buying into a brand, I suppose, in a sense, right? It's more than a car, as you sort of said. How do you kind of balance that when you've got sort of, you know, an EV versus an ICE kind of based kind of form of mobility, like an EV Triumph, right? An EV Harley, you know, you know, how does that square up with your points around, you know, that connectivity piece?
Yeah, look, I think the bike world is realizing where EV can fit. I was with Harley when the Livewire brand was really brought to the market, and that challenge of engaging a consumer who wants to go out on a Sunday morning blast for a couple of hours. And of course, the internet and the forums are full of stories of being left behind because my friends had their bacon sandwich, they've had their coffee, they've filled up with fuel, all done in 15 minutes. And at the same time, the EV bike is left charging up. And of course, EV technology means that the harder you push it, the more it works the battery, and therefore the lower the range. Whereas on bikes, that on ICE product, that disparity is much less. So if you push an ICE bike or an ICE car, yes, you'll lose a bit of range, but not to the same extent. So I think realizing the value of EV in bikes for recreational purposes, you know, we're seeing a bit of an explosion of motocross bikes with EV technology. Again, you can then plug your phone on as your user interface, rather than having a fixed binnacle on the bike. I think that's a good thing. Yeah, I think EV has its place in two wheels. I'm not sure, because of the weight of the batteries and the range challenges, because of the amount of batteries you require and the impact it then has on the performance, it's necessarily there yet by comparison to cars. But it will come. It will come. It goes back to this 8, 10, 15 years behind perspective. And bikes really do follow cars in terms of that technology. I had a great time on a Harley in Barcelona. In fact, I was on a Livewire. We went for a bit of a press ride or an influencers ride around the hills of Barcelona.
Wow.
And we had an amazing time. Sports mode, hardly used the brakes because you've got brake regeneration. So there is in the right place, the right time.
Mm-hmm.
I think battery technology, EV technology in bikes works. I think the application in cars is now really sophisticated. And actually, the more people find out about EV, I think the more the reality of how usable and how easy it is to adopt. As I say, I've got an EV. I had a Model Y. I've now got an MG4, and I've also got the new HS plug-in hybrid. And I think that plug-in hybrid is the true transition from having that ICE engine
Mm-hmm.
or ICE product into having a transition. So it covers 75 miles on full electric. I probably charge it up once a week.
Fill it up.
Fill it up. In fact, I probably don't even fill it once a month. I'll fill it up.
That's incredible.
That's the difference. Is that I probably charge it up overnight, maybe 2 or 3 times a week, and I've done over 6,000 miles in it, and I've probably put 6 tanks of fuel in it.
Wow.
Maybe not even as many as that. And most of that's because going to the airport's longer than the 75-mile range. So I use the fuel going to the airport as much as anything for my job. So I think plug-in hybrids are probably the transition. When they came out to begin with, everybody will remember Mitsubishi Outlander EVs and or plug-in hybrids. And most adopters of that were for the reasons of benefit in kind and company car tax and things like that. So, but the range wasn't really there.
Mm-hmm.
I think the range is now coming along on plug-in hybrids, and if somebody wants to try before they buy,
Mm-hmm.
go fully adopted EV, I think that's the way to go.
That's really interesting. Kind of leads me to my next question around you sort of touched on sort of getting people kind of your bums on seats, as it were. But tell me a little bit about kind of how you've seen sort of technology sort of, I suppose, transform that whole kind of customer experience.
Yeah, I think we've seen it over time from an engine point of view and from a engagement point of view. People started to put hybrid products into top up the performance of ICE. If I remember back a number of years, Ferrari started bringing in product that was a hybrid product, and I think it wasn't therefore used as an electric product. It was used as a performance tool, building on the back of Formula One. You look at Formula One and where it is with hybrid technology. And that really is leading the way. It also talks about things like e-fuels, so these synthetic fuels that are going to replace, from a carbon capture point of view, they're going to potentially keep ICE product alive for a lot longer. So I think seeing technology coming into product like that is incredible. And I think, as I talked about, when you get in the car now, if it's a pure EV car, you don't get that emotional connection,
Mm-hmm.
and therefore you need that connectivity another way. And so to learn about what the buyer wants, what excites them, you just have to look around at Apple products. How easy is it to join everything up? How easy is it to make it feel like it's part of the house, whether it be your peer group or whether it be your family, allowing them to be able to get in and feel excited about whatever the technology is in the product, I think is important. So everybody needs in their product to have a reason to buy, and technology can be the reason to buy. And we've just got to position it in such a way that it's the bragging rights, because it used to be you had bragging rights because maybe you had 100 horsepower, and then it grew up to being you've got a 5th gear. And then all of a sudden you've got fog lights, and as you grow up and get older, you've got lightweight alloys, you've got a body kit. So technology evolves. You've got carbon spoilers. There's all these things come in technology generation after generation after generation, and we're just now in a digital technology generation. And so that electric product, whether it be to enhance the performance of the car, my car is a D SUV, it should be a family run around, but actually when you combine the petrol and the electric engine, all of a sudden I've got 300 horsepower in a car that, even 3, 4, 5 years ago, we'd probably have 110, 120 horsepower. And it's usable, which is great. And the technology is so clever that it just combines it without you even having to think about it. And I think that's where the technology is creating, rather than engaging, I would call it bragging rights. You're getting these little things that help to connect you to the reasons why you buy.
Mm-hmm.
And we've just got to find how we can give it to the consumer in the way they want it.
Let's talk about skills, because obviously, you've talked a lot about the change, that's gone on through your career and across the industry. Tell us a little bit about sort of like how you think about sort of, having the right skills to do the job, and sort of, the gaps you see across the sector, and how you like to kind of develop those skills in your teams.
I think the main thing in the automotive industry, and I'm sure it's true of other industries, is having the ability to change, being adaptable, being dynamic, avoiding really being stuck in your thoughts and your perspectives of how things should be, because whether you like it or not, it could be that government makes a decision that changes what you need to do. It could be that consumer choice moves along. We went from having everybody had a saloon car, then everybody had an estate car, then everybody had an SUV, as a simple example of how consumer tastes change. And if you're stuck in the way that a Ford Orion has to be the best car in the world, and it will always be, and we don't need seatbelts, and we could go on and on and on about how things have changed, designs have changed for pedestrian impact, deployable airbags, deployable bonnets. We could talk about the way even the tires of a car have changed to become more efficient or effective in different weather conditions. And I think if you're stuck that a product has to be a certain way, I think you're going to be very short time in the industry. So to be open-minded, be adaptable. I've described my career as everything from pricing parts to product development to moving overseas and seeing how other countries and other markets evolve and develop. I think they're all important. So that's probably the main thing, is to be open-minded. On top of that, inquisitive, curious. It's probably only in the last 15 years that I've realized that I have 2 ears and one mouth. So be open to asking questions, be open to listening to the answers, and appreciate what people are saying. You don't have to agree with them, but it just, again, adds to that experiential bank account that you have to be able to respond when they come. And I think that's the main skill, really. Ultimately, again, going back to the point about white goods, people have got choice, and people buy from people, trust, and therefore I think if you've got a general connection. So if I'm recruiting for into my team, I'm very much looking at, first of all, what's their attitude, not what their qualification is, because generally you wouldn't apply for a job if you haven't got the right qualifications. That is a binary choice. Either they have the qualifications or they don't. But what's potentially more important is the fit and their attitude. So to have an open attitude, to be positive. I always like team members to look for little wins. It's not about the big picture. Yes, you need a strategy, but at the end of every day, you've got to feel like you've achieved something. And if you can find that little bit of win in every day or every week, if you can feel like you've contributed positively to the team outcome, the company outcome, even your own personal development, I think that's the right attitude to have. So that's really important. So yes, you've got the qualifications. That's a binary point. But from an emotional point of view, coming back to that, it always comes back to that. Are they going to be a good fit for the team? And also, are they going to respect, but also be part of the company culture? Because every company has a different culture. And it's important to be able to try and understand that. If I look at my career, right at the beginning, Jaguar Land Rover was owned by Ford at the time. So big American corp, certain way of doing business. Then I went to Citroën, so part of PSA Group, and then into Bentley. very, very British, but owned by Volkswagen Group. From Bentley back into Jaguar Land Rover at the time, then owned by Tata, so Indian company, but run in a very British way, but a real combination. And actually, part of my role was to go out to India and see how the business was run out in India. And then into bikes, Triumph, family owned. One man makes the decisions ultimately. And, that's a real different experience to being part of a big corporate. From there into Harley, directly involved in being, that American culture of, you've got the brand, Harley's is as recognizable as Jack Daniels or Levi Strauss. It's an American icon.
Yeah.
But what you see from the outside and what you perceive the company to be, actually, it's still a shareholder-owned listed company. And therefore it has certain responsibilities. So on one side, you've got the lifestyle, you've got that stereotype, that perception of what it's going to be like. And on the inside, you've got the true American corporate culture that goes on in the background. And now coming to MG, of course, a Chinese-owned but British heritage brand.
Yep.
It's been around for 100 years. So, being adaptable to cultures and structure, I think, is important. I think they're the main things.
And looking forward for a moment, sort of what sort of major trends do you sort of see kind of coming in the next few years?
I think software will continue to play a big part in our lives. I think, if I look at the workshop environment in automotive, it's got one heck of a change coming. We talked about the DIY mechanic, but I think those really highly skilled mechanics who can fix any product, if they take an engine apart, a gearbox apart, they can, turn something that would appear to be very, very broken and almost rebuild it. I think that's going to be much more challenging. You're going to be replacing power plants, literally the whole, what would be traditionally called the engine or the drivetrain or you're literally going to take the skateboard and replace it with another skateboard in the future, because the engines are all built within the chassis. So I think that is going to be a very different skill set and a very big transition for us as an industry. Retaining people in the workshop, I think that's always the biggest challenge, but also retaining people in the workshop that can be software engineers rather than hardware engineers. And that is something we're all going to have to learn to evolve and change to appreciate how things can be fixed, and how difficult it can also be to fix these things. You get electrical gremlins, and sometimes you just never know what the reason is, but they exist. And sometimes it can be because of the way the software is written versus how the user uses the product. So track and trace is having that patience to what used to be following an electrical diagram, I think is now going to be a software programming challenge. So I think our technicians in the workshop are going to change dramatically. Those kids that are currently at school and university who are learning to program, I think actually are potentially the future of our workshops, because they have a basic understanding or a very technical understanding of how computers work. And nowadays, your average car is more powerful than the street worth of computers. So I think that's our biggest challenge, is evolving the after sales and the technological kind of engineers in the future.
And you're going to be, you're probably now competing against other technology companies rather than other automotive OEMs and so forth, right? Your competition suddenly changes, right? You're moving, if not, you already are a technology company in many ways, right? With obviously an incredible brand too.
Very much. Yeah, I mean, you've seen companies that are technology companies trying and then potentially walking away from automotive. Dyson came into the market. Apple were looking at it. There's collaborations all around. MG ultimately owned by SAIC Automotive, so Shanghai Automotive. And I look over at China, and there's a collaboration between SAIC and Alibaba. It's a brand called IM.
Wow.
And that is a technology company ultimately. It's as big as Amazon. And, you look at the Chinese market and they have products that use the electric motors in different ways. Instead of a parallel park, it's literally a sideways park. So the wheels turn in such a way as to drag the car into the parking space.
Radical.
So it truly is. And I think the automotive industry, those big players, those big names will remain. Who owns some of those big names will be interesting to see in the future. See how they adapt to the technology requirements, the software requirements of the future. I think if you want to have a glimpse into the future of automotive, then have a look at China. There's a lot of talk about Chinese manufacturers coming into Europe, into the UK in particular, due to the tariff situation in Europe. But you look at the manufacturers that are coming in and the product they're bringing, and I think particularly at that end of the market, which would be the volume end of the market. China has evolved their market so fast. It's something like 50% of all product are EV already, if not more in some cities. And the technology that's within the cars is phenomenal, out of the world at times. And if you get the opportunity, have a look at what's coming up at the Shanghai Auto Show, which I think is in April. Because that will be a window into the future of automotive. Even if it's not Chinese manufacturers that make it, it's the direction of travel, certainly in the short to medium term. And I think everybody should be aware of that, because that's the expectation of the consumer. And when you're in the volume market, I think the badge value, the badge snobbery is probably changing. Mm-hmm. People are quicker to adopt based on a combination of value, which comes with price, but also what you get with the car. I think some of that badge value is more flexible these days, and people are willing to try something. Technology has proven that you don't have to have I'll not use any brands, but you don't have to spend thousands on a TV anymore. You can spend a couple of £100 and you get a very good television. And I think that's the same evolution that's coming in automotive.
And you've got front row seats.
I do. Look, if you had considered, let's say, 20 years ago, would MG be the brand that brings out the first full production all-electric two-wheeled roadster with scissor doors and 500 horsepower equivalent and 0 to 60 in 3.2 seconds? I think people would have turned their noses up at it. But that is a window into the power of how fast technology is moving and how easily implemented. The product development cycle of the Chinese manufacturers is incredible. And Cyberster, designed in London at the European Design Studio at our offices in London, but built with this speed of technology that probably nobody thought was able to be put into production. And the turnaround time, it used to be years and years. You used to talk about a 12-year product cycle for cars. It's probably 2 to 3 years for some product now. And it's incredible that's possible to be done now.
So going back to the Paul who was applying for the job in the West Midlands, go back to him now and you give him one piece of advice.
Buy that Land Rover Defender you wanted. That's the one piece of advice. I should have bought that 110 pickup. I should have had it double cab. I can just see it now on the driveway, going up in value, probably rusting in certain places and probably not running the way I want it because I'd try and be a DIY mechanic. But it's probably the last car that I probably could have taken apart. That's probably what I would tell myself 20 years ago. But I think if I was to talk about going into it now, I think just open ears, open eyes, open to the adventure. You can have a cracking career in automotive. You can have a cracking career. I think in any industry, if you are open to really wanting to do different things at different times. I'm very lucky that my wife and my family are very trusting of my decisions. You know, I took my wife to South Africa. We had an amazing time. We grew as a family over there, but not just in terms of the number of people, but also in terms of our life experience, our friendship group. And I think if you are open to developing whatever industry, but in particular the automotive industry, it truly is global. And I think if you can take the blinkers off, remove any preconceptions, and just be open to listening, which, as I say, probably 15 years ago, I probably wasn't as open to listening preconceived ideas. But I think now I'm, with the hindsight of experience, the value of listening to other people's experience, and adopting the perspective of just take whichever path you feel is right in front of you, then I think that's probably my advice to myself.
Paul, thank you for joining us on Leap Forward.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.